So the Alliance to Restore the Republic, or the Rebel Alliance, found itself facing an enemy that was far larger and more capable than themselves, forcing them to adopt some rather unique tactics and rather unique organization systems within their naval structure. So today we're going to talk about how fleets within the Rebel Alliance were organized, and really focus on how those fleets were comprised, what kind of ships would make up those fleets, and a little bit about what kind of tactics they would use. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So, before we begin, there is one aspect to the Rebel Alliance Navy that is, once again, fairly unique from other factions, and that's that they do have a bit of a looser structure. We see, on several occasions, Rebel fleets kind of thrown together at the last minute by some motivated individuals to go and participate in battles. The most obvious example of this is the Battle of Scarif, a battle that was never ordered by Rebel High Command, and only really happened because basically an entire fleet decided to jump into this engagement that they weren't ordered to. And in situations like that, there's clearly no, defined fleet composition, so we're going to leave those as outliers and focus primarily on the kind of things that Rebel High Command would order. So let's start with the smallest elements of the Rebel Navy. I'm going to call these, raiding fleets. These are elements designed to get in, hit a target, and get out, and they are designed to be fast and maneuverable. As such, they usually include no capital ships, consisting entirely of strike wings of light fighters. We see one of these in Rogue One when the Imperial facility on Eridu is struck by Rebel starfighters, as they seem to be operating completely independently from any capital ship, using their own onboard hyperdrives to jump from a Rebel base somewhere into the system that their target's at, fly in, hit their target, and then get out before they can even be really reacted to. This is by far the core of Rebel naval strategy, are these hit-and-run attacks using small strike fighters, as they can be carried out very quickly, achieve their goals almost instantaneously, and then evacuate, keeping most of those units intact. But that's not always enough to achieve their goals. Sometimes the Rebels need a larger vessel like a capital ship to be able to do something like deliver supplies, so we're going to move up one level to what I call Rebel supply fleets. Now, these fleets often consist of a flight of starfighters and 2 or 3 small capital ships. These are going to be CR-90s or GR-75 transports. These are ships that, while they are combat capable, in the case of the CR-90, could be completely oriented to be a combat capable variant, they are also used often for transporting supplies. These Rebel supply fleets, once again as I'm calling them, are often used for either very light hit-and-runs that are too large to be done entirely with starfighters, or, in more common cases, used to deliver supplies somewhere, often things like running an Imperial blockade, which we see several times. Fleets of this size are well suited for that, since they have some decent-sized ships that can be loaded with supplies and run down to the surface of a planet, but they're not using large capital ships that would draw much more Imperial attention and be a slower target. Everything involved in these fleets are fast and nimble. But if you're going directly into combat, expecting to go toe-to-toe with larger Imperial forces, that's when you get to what I'm going to call a base fleet. This is a fleet that represents the combined capabilities of a Rebel base. A great example of this would be the fleet that defended Atollon during the Battle of Atollon. It consisted of a few Nebulon Bs, a large number of those smaller ships, CR-90s, GR-75s, and in this particular case, a few Hammerhead corvettes, and then however many starfighters that organization could muster, which would vary based on the size of the fleet. These are, at least in the early days of the Rebel Alliance, some of their most capable combat fleets, being deployed and often representing large sections of the Rebel Alliance, if not the entirety of the faction at the time. As a result, these fleets, at least in the early days, were fairly rare, but as the war dragged on, especially as we get closer to and immediately after the Battle of Yavin and larger ships become available to the Rebel Alliance in larger numbers, the fleet composition of Rebel forces tends to shift. By the time we're looking at the Battle of Endor and the beginning of the fall of the Galactic Empire, the composition of most Rebel fleets has shifted to be based around Mon Calamari cruisers, and there's a very specific reason for this. Mon Calamari cruisers can more or less match the capability of an Imperial-class Star Destroyer. As such, most of these fleets then consisted of a single Mon Calamari cruiser of one of various types, supported by 2 to 3 medium-sized capital ships, think Nebulon Bs, or in some cases captured Architans, and then a number of light strike vehicles to sort of scout around the perimeter and serve as escort vessels. These would be most notably Corellian corvettes, but occasionally GR-75s or Hammerhead-class corvettes. And all of this would be supported by a fighter wing that would be based on the Mon Calamari cruiser, which often could serve as a carrier. In extreme situations, several of these fleets could be combined to carry out a single large maneuver, and this is likely what we saw during the Battle of Endor, where several of these small fleets assembled in the Sulla system before carrying out an assault against the Imperial forces at Endor. This trend would continue all the way through to the end of the Galactic Civil War, at least the formal end of the Galactic Civil War at the Battle of Jakku, when a similar situation was likely carried out, where several of these smaller rebel, I'm going to call them maybe strike groups, were assembled to form a much larger, task force to go and respond to a very specific threat. Still, this is a lot of ships for a faction that ultimately started as a bunch of disgruntled farmers and ex-separatists. If you'd like to learn about how the Rebel Alliance built this navy, I'll leave a link up here to a video I put out earlier this week about how the Rebel Alliance navy came to be and where these ships came from. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments if you were leading the Rebel Alliance navy and had to figure out exactly how you were going to organize this many ships and use them most efficiently. What would you do? How would you organize them? And do you think this organization structure makes sense, or do you think a more rigid structure like what the Empire has is necessary for running a faction on a galactic scale, even if you're an underdog fighting an oppressive government? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, you could let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.